Joining us now on the line is KT McFarland, Fox News national security analyst and all-round great gal. Hey, KT, how are you?
Good morning. I'm terrific.
I want to start off by talking about your Secretary of State, John Kerry, was talking about how difficult it is to do this diplomacy day, this diplomacy thing, and he was thinking about how much easier it must have been back in the day. Here is Secretary of State John Kerry.
I can't help but think, coming back to that lesson that I mentioned, that during the Cold War, it may not have seemed so at the time, obviously, to great leaders. But it was easier than it is today. Simpler is maybe a way to put it. The choices were less varied, less complicated, more stark, more clear. Communism, democracy, West, East, the Iron Curtain, the great line of divide.
All right, so KT, you knew some of those great leaders who were on the national stage during the Cold War. Was it easier back then?
Look, I wish these guys would just stop whining. And man up. Get with it. We elected you to deal with this, and now you're whining and complaining that just because you can't get anything done, just because you've failed at everything you've done, it's not the world's fault. It's your fault. And I guess I'm just so frustrated, especially when the president made the decision on the Keystone Pipeline, because the signal that sent to the world was, okay, America could free the world from the grip of Russia, of the Middle East, of terrorism. But what are we going to do? No, we're not going to let America develop our oil and natural gas. We're going to make sure that, I guess, the radical environmentalists donate a lot of money to the Democratic Party, and so we're just not going to worry about, the fact that we're having our lunch eaten throughout Europe, throughout the Middle East, and in Asia. And it's a general decline on the part of the United States, and it's a deliberate decline, and it is so unnecessary. And just, when my kids were little, in fact, we still do, above our kitchen table we have a sign that says whining with a big X in front of it.
No whining?
No whining.
The
You're
international
not whining,
symbol
man
for
up
no
and
whining.
do your job.
But you say, KT McFarland, and rightly so, that they were elected to handle these things. It goes further than that. They proclaimed that they were the experts, that Mitt Romney wasn't ready to lead, that he wasn't prepared, that it's too dangerous, this world, to put an amateur who still thinks Russia is a global rival to us. I mean, not only are they showing themselves, as you said, to whine about these things, but I think that John Kerry, after all these years, still has a fundamental misunderstanding of what the Cold War really was.
Yeah, and they're going to find out the hard way, because I think Putin's goal in Europe, for example, with Ukraine, with Crimea, with all the things he's done, is the disintegration of NATO, or to show NATO to be a paper tiger and emasculated.
Yeah.
And he's doing a very good job of it, and probably by the time Secretary Kerry and President Obama leave office, NATO will be a shell of itself. Now, why do I say that? The thought was always that, well, there's this Article 5 in the NATO treaty, an attack against one is an attack against all. But the key word is armed attack. Putin realizes that an armed attack against a NATO country, like Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Poland, name your NATO country, means that all of NATO responds. But what if it's not an armed attack? What if it's what we've seen so far in Crimea?
Insidious, yeah.
If it's guys that don't have uniforms on that say Russia? What if it's no tanks? What if it's what they have done so far? That's not an armed attack. And you can just imagine the lawyers in the White House and in NATO saying, well, we don't have to do anything. It's not an armed attack.
Well, we are going to send some troops over to Poland, 150 of them. We're going to send 450 to Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. We are told that this will be a continual presence, that they will be replaced from time to time and rotated in and rotated out. We by the way, we have 67,000 troops based in Europe right now. What's going on here?
Well, I mean, I guess it's a step in the right direction, but it might be a little bit better if what we did was things like the missile shield in Poland and the Czech Republic that the President Obama canceled. It might be better
unilaterally without getting anything from the Russians.
Without getting anything for it. He just like a goodwill gesture, hoping that his new pals, the Russians, were going to
reset.
Yeah, we're going to
Hillary's
reset
plan.
this.
Yeah.
Are you kidding? They put that in their pocket and they said, what's next? But it has bigger implications even than NATO in Europe. what it says to our allies in the Middle East. We're leaving the Middle East, guys. Egypt, Israel, you're on your own. What it also says, and the reason the president's making the trip to Asia starting today, where he's going to Japan, he's going to South Korea, is to tell them, look, don't take this seriously. Just because Russia's gobbling up stuff in Europe, don't think that China's going to be able to gobble you guys up. We're going to be your good allies. Well, what kind of credibility does that have after the whining and after the red lines and after the serious consequences that amount to nothing?
KT McFarland, can I start? You mentioned the Middle East. Let's circle back there because the other big story this week was the red line was crossed again, apparently. We have signals that Syria possibly used chemical weapons or some sort of chemical compounds in an attack there. And last time this happened, we were brought back from the brink of war by our partner in peace, Vladimir Putin. Now what?
Well, what's happening is the United States is leaving the Middle East. We are perceived as leaving the Middle East. The problem is, because our president refuses to let us develop American energy, we are stuck in the Middle East because we're dependent upon them for energy. Yeah. So if we're going to not develop our own energy, we better make sure we have access to Middle East energy. The president's basically 0 for 2 now. Yeah. We're not going to develop our own, but we're leaving the Middle East. Who are we leaving the Middle East in charge of? Iran, the ascendant Iran, and Russia, calling the shots in Syria. But the real problem with Syria, when that war winds down, there are a lot of jihadist rebels who are not going to go back to Europe, the United States, or wherever they're from in the Middle East and open a falafel shop. They're going to launch terrorist activities in their countries.
And on that cheery note, we'll leave it right there. KT, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.